Welcome back to Mainstream PC, everyone. My name is Julian, and today I'll give you a little look at my DIY PC chassis, which I built into an IKEA drawer. The reason for this was because in our living room, I didn't really want to have either a mini ITX case or a full tower case. So I thought this unused drawer would be a good place to hide a full PC, a home theater PC, and it's been serving me well for the last year and a half. But there were some upgrades in the meantime, and I also want to switch from this GTX 1070 Asus Strix model to this 1070 Ti Mini from Zotac that I managed to grab at a really good price used. And I didn't originally plan to make a video about this, but my wife said, well, this is something that not everyone has seen, so it might be interesting content. Again, this might not be so mainstream PC, but all of these parts are just regular PC hardware. And the IKEA drawer, the modification of the IKEA drawer wasn't exactly something too unusual. Like, I only drilled a couple of round holes with a hole saw. You see a very ugly cutout for the GPU I/O here that I made. This is a vertical GPU mount from Cooler Master. I apologize. And yeah, there's a regular hard drive in here, spinning hard drive, an ATX power supply, and some other smaller things, which I'll show you in the top-down view in a second. All right, so what do we have? We have an intake fan, we have an outtake fan, we have a 1 terabyte hard drive, we have my old workstation board, Maximus 8 Hero, which is a Z170 board with a 6700K under it. This is an IS50 from ID Cooling. Not the greatest low profile cooler in the world, but it's actually doing a pretty great job at providing air, not only for cooling the CPU on the 5 heat pipes, which is doing fairly well. It's also cooling the VRM. 2 sticks of 4 gigs of RAM each, so 8 gigs in total in the system at the moment, in dual channel. 250 gigabyte SSD, some extra cables, which would be for either of these graphics cards, and one of my favorites, the G650M bronze rated power supply from Cooler Master. And then there's only like a dust filter here, which is held on by magnets. A few cutouts here for the power cable, for the air, and for GPU I/O, and also for the Ethernet cable, which I've actually routed through the same hole as the power cable into this jack, which is quite a tight fit. There's another thing that I will try to improve by moving this board back, and hopefully I'll be able to mount the GPU vertically. Let's see, which should give me more clearance in the back here to reach the I/O. There's also this little fan controller. These are just regular Molex powered fans, essentially. Here's the power connected to this fan hub, which just has like a regular dial type voltage controller, so I can increase or decrease the voltage. This was primarily because I was worried it would make a lot of noise if I'm watching movies or something off the thing, but even if I run them at full bore, it's not bad at all, so I can't really hear it when I'm sitting on the couch. So now that we've seen what's inside this thing, let me talk a little bit about why I want to make any modifications at all. First of all, this 1070 I would like to replace with the 1070 Ti. It's a minor performance increase, but mainly this thing is really big and quite heavy. And I feel like this Mini just fits the bill better. I think it'll also allow for better airflow. And secondly, I bought, well, as you might have seen, this thing is just basically the standoffs are just directly screwed into the base plate, which is very thin on this drawer. And I bought this test bed open case from an online retailer here for $12. I've used it for my test bench as well, which I made out of wood with that thing on top, just to have like proper GPU mounts and yeah, to screw in the ATX power supply, but actually I didn't need that, but it's nice to have. It does fit in here, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to clear the height with the 1070 Ti in the vertical position. I think I might still have to mount it horizontally, because the height might clear, same as this ATX power supply, but as soon as there's a PCI plugged in here, I think the drawer closes in about here, the top wooden part that's in the frame basically lies here somewhere. So it barely clears this power supply. And if I'm just by comparison move the graphics card in this vertical position right next to it, I don't think I'll be able to plug in a PCIe power connector and still be able to close the drawer. So let's see what I can achieve. I really want to clean up the whole thing. This cable mess with the fan control is horrid. So let's see how well it goes. I hope in the outro I can be proud of what I've achieved.
2 hours later.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is my creation. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out quite as I planned, but as you might notice, the fans, I've moved them outside now in order to create more space for mostly the motherboard. And I've moved the motherboard up so that the cooler here is no longer interfering with the graphics card so much as it was the case. This was not an issue before I switched this motherboard. On this motherboard, apparently the cooler is, or the CPU socket is a little bit closer to the PCIe lanes than on my H270 Prime, I think, from Asus, which I had in here before. So now I had to move the motherboard up. By moving the motherboard up, I couldn't keep the power supply there because there was already no space. So I decided to just give it the old switcheroo, move the hard drive up here, move the power supply down here. Not ideal because the cutout for the power and everything that comes in from my wall actually comes from that side. So now I'll have to route the cable all the way over here. It's okay. Unfortunately also that means that all the power routing now has to take the long way around to reach everything in this chassis. But we made it work. Another thing, the motherboard is now much closer to the actual back wall, which also means that my riser cable, which before the motherboard was further away, and when I mounted the graphics card in here like it was intended to, the riser would kink essentially, a little, not just kink, but kind of like shift out of alignment, which this riser cable on here on this Cooler Master vertical GPU mount is a ribbon cable, and ribbon cables don't really do this kind of movement very well. So it's basically shearing against each other because all the ribbons are connected. So there was a lot of strain on the riser connector down here. The cables actually looks almost damaged, but last time I tried it, it was still working. So I hope it's still working. And I hope that I've covered everything. I also put more standoffs because this is an EATX motherboard. So actually it's longer. So I put 9 standoffs, but I only screwed in 5 screws because God knows it's laying on its back. It's not going to go anywhere. And I also switched the orientation of the airflow. So this is an intake now. This is an exhaust. So air comes in here, passes by here, passes the CPU and the graphics card, reaches the power supply in the end. The power supply sucks in whatever warm heat is in here to cool itself a little bit. This power supply, I think it never really spins up much with this kind of configuration because we're only reaching about 50% of its peak wattage. And the hot air gets exhausted here. Another thing that's different from the GTX 1070 that I was using before, might not be able to see it, but these fins, they're basically aligned crossways. So originally when this card was in here, my airflow was like this, right? So I was expecting that most of the air would pass through and like at least half of the hot air would be exhausted this way. So it would make sense that the air flows kind of in this direction. With this graphics card, however, with the Zotac GTX 1070 Ti Mini, the fins are oriented along the length of the card. So it's exhausting heat here, which I'm cool with. And it's expelling heat towards the back of this case. But I hope that the airflow will still pick up whatever hot air accumulates here and kind of vent it out this way now, as opposed to this way from before. The hard drive, I'm not too worried about getting too hot. It doesn't have to do much most of the time anyway. And I think that's it. Let's see if it still boots and if the thing is still working.
The next day.
Alright, welcome to my living room. So we are here. This is where the drawer PC belongs. I brought the drawer down. It's a new day. I didn't manage to finish filming yesterday. In order to start the computer, I bought this little doodad, which is just a power button and front USB and front audio, which hooks up like this. It's the same as you have in a regular PC case. I drilled that through the top here, which leads straight into the case essentially. So let me hook everything up, and as you can see, network cable RJ45, AC power plug and HDMI cable are routed through here as well. And there are cutouts for the fans, which I hope will fit perfectly. And yeah, let me get back to you once I've hooked everything up, and let's see if this thing is still working, because I didn't test it. All right, so it's booting. Let me take you over here. This is what it looks like on the inside. You see that RJ45 is a pretty tight fit with the intake fan there. But it's the only way I could get the board closer to the wall for the riser cable not to shear so much, by using that extra cutout and moving the fans outside. So let's have a look if it actually outputs anything. Let's see on the screen, and yeah, Postcode is AO, which means all okay. So it should actually be outputting. I hope this also closes, as it should. No output. You sure? Oh, yeah, I didn't hook up the HDMI cable. I just realized. There we go. Password's incorrect. Try again. But it is working. Ignore my cringy avatar. Home theater PC is back in the works. There's a 1070 Ti running on it. First things first, gonna uninstall the drivers, install clean drivers. Just to avoid any weirdness with that. But it seems to be working fine. Gonna have a quick look at the temps later, and if it works, it works. And this is what it looks like. See you again next time on Mainstream PC. My name is Julian. Thank you for looking. Thank you for watching. Sorry. Look at me, I'm sweating. It's hot here.